Hello Year 7, it's the next lesson in the sequence on Native Americans and looking at a completely alien culture and how that affects us and how we can understand it, which I think is important in the current times and in the current context to look at something you've never seen before and to understand how people view that and the inherent biases that come with looking at that and to try and tackle them in our own lives. Now we've done 2 lessons already. I've explained how the settlers came along and attempted to create their own way of identifying who the natives were and what they were about and why there were problems with that approach. That first worksheet was all about trying to understand why it was you couldn't just impose a view on the natives. They had lives, they had their own way of doing things. The last question on that worksheet asked you to work out what those natives' ways were. Now I'll come back to that in a moment. And then we looked at the problems of the evidence on a more structural level and some of the problems that we may find beyond just bias, but also stuff not being available and the fact that the natives had an oral tradition. Most of what they said was not written down. And so therefore it's very difficult for us as historians to work with what we have. Nevertheless, I think it's still very important and we can learn a lot. Today's lesson is going to be taking those 2 bits that we've been doing, those 2 sides of things, putting them together and making sense out of it in a way that I hope you will find interesting. So let's start with this image here. You've seen this before. I used it very early on in our first lesson. Can you remember what it is? Pause the video if you have to. Indeed, it's a weave. It's the warp and the weft. Can you remember the 2 different sides of this warp and weft? I can't remember which way around they go. Indeed, how did the natives identify themselves? As a warp and a weft with a lineage and a tribe /clan. Now, on that first thing that we did, you learned that there was a bit more to it than that. There were multiple layers of this house and clan and multiple layers of lineage. So today, we're going to focus on the Northwest Territory. That's an area of coniferous forest and pines on mountainsides and mountain streams, mountain rivers that flow into the North Pacific. It's cold in winter, it's a temperate climate, it's got animals that you or I would be more familiar with, and in many ways it's similar to medieval Northern Europe in terms of its temperate climate and the kind of animals that live there. As a consequence, it makes sense for us to start there when we're looking at an alien culture because we've studied the medieval era and we kind of understand that and how different it was to our modern lives. So let's take that a stage further, because what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about this area. Here it is in map format. And you can already see there are some interesting things about this. For one, we've got a photograph here taken in the early 1900s showing that these natives were still living their traditional lives that late on, long after the settlers, the white settlers, had pretty much run the show. You can see how this affects their lives. They're wearing clothes that are very clearly made in factories. They're wearing hats that are very clearly waterproof and provided by the Western settlers. And they're in a boat that is very clearly a Western design. These are natives, sure, living their traditional lives, sure, but not in their traditional way. But it gives an idea about what they're about. These boats were necessary. They were ocean going because they hunted whales. That's how they survived. That's what they fed on. That's what they fished. Furthermore, you've got this. Now, you might have heard about totem poles. This is a totem pole. We'll talk about totems later. And the totem pole is a means of identification. We find them all over the place in this area of what is now the United States. And here are the different tribes. You've got the Tlingit, the inland Tlingit, the Tagish, the Kaska, the Denetha, the Deneza, the Sakani, the Gitsan, the Niska'a, the Shimshian, the Hasla, the Haida, and so on and so forth. These are not words and phrases you and I are familiar with. What you have here is an attempt by Westerners, people with the same alphabet of you or I, to try and put the sounds they were hearing into our letters so that we could pronounce them. Because the language we're going to be looking at is very, very different. Now, how the natives identify themselves are tribes like that. You saw on that map that it's difficult to put proper borders in. It's very, very hard to organize this. Now, the red lines, by the way, in case you're wondering, are European roads. So let's move on. How did the tribal system actually work? We know that it exists, But how does it work? Now, it's a little bit interactive, so bear with me. There's a worksheet that comes with this lesson, and you'll find it at the end of the PowerPoint, not the last slide. The last couple of slides, I believe, are fill-in versions. If you're finding it difficult to write out huge amounts, feel free to use them, but you might want to just use the worksheet first and then save those for later. So not the last two slides, the one before that, you'll find a worksheet that has all the information on. Now, in a lesson, I would have you print that out and have it in front of you. In fact, if I just stop that share, and then I'm going to pause the video. So it pauses for me, but not for you. And I apologize if when I come back, I look even more disheveled than I currently do. So first things first, an apology. It is in the last two slides after all. It looks like this. There you go. There is the worksheet that I'd ask you to use. Now, in a lesson, I'd say don't fill in this section here because I need the worksheet. Again, you guys, of course, if you're printing this off, can totally fill that in. It's fine. You might prefer to write your own diagram. I don't know. The rest of the tasks down here we'll work through one by one, and I'll work you through what's said on here. So don't worry, we are doing that. I'm going to start with this first bit here. And the task is, what tribe of Moiety is running water? Now, Moiety is a bit more of a complicated term than it first appears. So bear with me. Oh, I've hit the wrong button. Bear with me. So what we've got at the beginning was the warp and the weft, the lineage, the tribe and clan. To make things easier, luckily for us, the French came up with some terms to try and explain these. And they came up with the tribe, which we're used to. We understand the term tribe. And the other word they had was moiety. Now, moiety is spelled M-O-I-E-T-Y. Don't ask me why, it's French. And in the Northwest, at least, the moieties and the tribes were very easy to follow. Now, later on, I'm going to be asking you to research your own Native American identity. More on that in a moment. And not every tribe refers to their moieties as moieties. You can use that word, but don't expect it to turn up on a YouTube search or an internet search on Google. You might have to go a bit of a digging to find the equivalent for the tribe that you're looking for. They all have an equivalent though, and that's interesting. So you can use clan or lineage to help you search for that term. But moiety is the more general term as far as there is such a thing. Here we have an Indian brave. His name is Sunkar Khan. And he is a native brave. That is, he is a child that's come of age. Now, how Native Americans came of age, I'll discuss at the end of here, and we will talk about it. But for now, he's come of age. He's recently come of age. This is the name he chose himself, or rather, the spirits chose for him. Now, he has to have part of his identity, apart from his name. You need to know your tribe and your moiety. Now, in Britain, we have tribes too, believe it or not. You have your name, it is a given name. That is your first name, and if you're lucky, you'll have a middle name as well, and maybe more than one. And those are designed to show a little bit more about who you are. Now, I don't for a moment believe that your names were assigned based after you were old enough to show your personality. They show your past. They show what your parents wanted to project onto you. Your name is very important in that regard. So consider some names within the class. We've got James, a very regal name. We've got a Mercedes. I love that name. Very interesting on what that might mean. We've got the name Toby. Very interesting name indeed. All of these have a projection. They carry with them an assumption in our culture and our society about what they mean. Well, in native societies, you get to choose your own name. Sir, you're missing something. Sorry, rhetorical student, you're dead right. I'm missing the surname. And your surname is fascinating because you tend to derive it from your dad, whether you like it or not. And that is fascinating because you carry with you a patronymic, a name of your father. You carry the male line in your name. We as a culture have decided that this is important and that it should be maintained. Now, natives don't have surnames, at least not as you would understand. Rather, they have a tribe and a moiety. You see where I'm going with this? They're kind of like surnames and middle names, and they carry information about who these people are in terms of their past. There's a reason I have my Lakota Sioux thing. Those who do not understand their own past are worse than wild beasts. Oh, see, always thinking. So here is Sunuk Arkan's mum and dad. We have Anotlosh, his dad, and he was a Tlingit chieftain. That's important. As a chieftain, it was important that he married outside of the tribe. That is unusual. And he's of the Raven Moiety. And we have his mother, Kauka, and she's a Haida woman of the Eagle Moiety. Now the question is this: which tribe and Moiety is Unukaakan? Now some of you have already printed off that thing that I showed you earlier and gone, sir, I don't find the name Unukaakan anywhere on that sheet. What I find is, well, if I translate the names, we have Wind in Hair, his dad, and Stands with Fist, I love that name, his mum. And these are the people that had him. He's running water, a native braid. Now, what tribe is he? Pause the video if you're going to do this properly and then come back to it. I'm going to assume you've had time to pause. Of course, he gets his tribe from his dad, making him a Tlingit. Ah, see, you've got to read the worksheet. It's that bit on the left. So where does he get his moiety? Is it from his dad? Of course not. It's Eagle, because he gets it from his mum. And that way, every native has both their father and their mother represented in their name, in a way that our culture simply doesn't do. And therefore, you have the warp and the weft weaving together to make them stronger. Okay, let's move on. So we know he's Tlingit, we know he's an eagle. If you go back to that worksheet, there's a question there about what's on his totem pole. So now you know what we're looking at, and we've looked at how we do it. If you read that worksheet at the end of the PowerPoint again, you will see on the left, in the final paragraph, it says different Moieties were allowed to do different jobs, and they would help anyone of the same Moiety, even if they weren't in the same tribe. Okay, but how do we work out which job running water is going to have? It's predetermined in many ways. Now you'll find on the sheet, underneath the little diagram with Wind in Hair and Stands with Fist, creating running water. That's not what we're talking about here, that's science. And we've written in the tribe and the Moiety, and I know it's Tlingit Eagle. Beneath there you'll find a little box that says Moiety and jobs. And you've got to work out what it is that running water's job is going to be in the tribe. Pause the video while you figure that out. Got it? Okay, good. The next question is question 3. What would its totem pole look like? Now here is a community house of the Tlingit tribe, and you can see it's painted in various colours. Outside you have these totems. Now these totem poles tell you who lives in the community house, so that when you're passing by, you can look over and you can see who is in that house. You know before you go in. Each totem pole, therefore, is going to have similar things, but in a different way, so you know who's in there. And the way the totem pole works is this. The first totem is the tribe symbol. Now, everybody in the same tribe would have the same tribe symbol at the bottom of their totem pole to say where they lived. On top of that, you have the Moiety symbol, and that has an animal too. On top of that, you have an animal that represents your job. And on top of that, when you've achieved enough notoriety, you'll have your own symbol to say, this is your totem pole. Your totem pole carries your full history. That's the idea. So the question 3 is, what would running water's totem pole by the community house actually look like? You've got to explain it as carefully as you can. If necessary, draw a diagram. I want to know at least 3 things that would be on his totem pole, and, if possible, the order they would appear in from the bottom to the top. That's how you answer question 3. Have a go, pause the video while you have a go, and then come back and see if you got the answer right. Okay, I'm going to assume I've given enough time to pause, and that this will make sure that anyone just skimming through looking for me talking doesn't get the answers straight away. So what does his totem pole look like? Well done. You clearly got the bear at the start. That's an easy one. Has to be his Tlingit. Indeed, the next one up has to be eagle, because that's his Moiety. There has to be an eagle symbol to show that his Moiety is eagle. Ah, now this next one's more interesting. If you look carefully on the chart, you'll notice that as Tlingit and as a Tlingit eagle, he can be one of 2 things, a butcher or a woodsman. I tend to assume that running water, given the choice, looking at the man, I think he'd have gone for woodsman. A woodsman's far more interesting. It's going to get him out of the village. So we're going to assume he's a woodsman. You could get away, therefore, either with an owl, or if you went the butcher route, a buffalo would have been fine too. So both of those would be perfectly acceptable. There's nothing wrong, as long as you've explained why you've chosen it. If you said either of those, well, then you're just too clever, aren't you? And you're amazing. So I'm going to go with owl. We're going to assume he's a woodsman for reasons that will become apparent in a later task. So we know what it looks like. Can't be a magpie, can't be a stag, but his dad's a chief. Doesn't matter. That's not how it works in Native American culture. Furthermore, the chief, although in charge, well, I'll come on to that in a moment. Let's go to question 4. Running Water is coming of age. He's going to marry. Who can he marry? Now, if you read this thing, it says to make sure they didn't interbreed, they used moieties. People are allowed to marry into the same tribe, but not the same clan, and were forbidden from marrying into the same moiety. Tribe was gained from the child's father and moiety from the child's mother, that way avoiding interbreeding. Well, here are 4 eligible girls that Running Water gets to choose as a wife. Now, you might have noticed my picture of Running Water isn't a real picture of a Northwest Indian. It's clearly a Plains Indian. It's just the best photograph I could find from the time. However, the pictures of the ladies are all Northwest Indian tribes, and they're all Tlingits, or Shimshians, or Haida. I looked them up deliberately and everything. So here we go. We've got Dances with Chickens. She's an Indian squaw from the Tlingit tribe and the Raven Moiety. We've got Eats with Hands from the Tlingit tribe and Eagle Moiety. We've got Runs with Geese from the Shimshian tribe and the Wolf Moiety. And we have Rainy Day from the Haida tribe and the Eagle Moiety. Girls don't get to choose their own names. They're chosen by their parents until such time as they are married, and then their husband chooses a new name to represent their personality. So, with whom can Running Water marry? Have a go. See if you can figure it out from the information on the worksheet. Oh, pause the video. You done? If you haven't done, make sure you've paused. Yeah, Liam, I'm just making sure you've got time to pause this time, because I remember I got the stinging rebuke. We're done? All good? Excellent. Then let's continue. Who did you think it was? It is, in fact, Dances with Chickens, the only actual option. I have artificially restricted the choice to make a point. Why? Well, she's part of the same tribe. You've got to marry within the tribe. But why not Eats with Hands? Simple. Eats with Hands shares a moiety, and you can't do that. And therefore, it's got to be Dances with Chickens. She's the only one in the same tribe, but of a different moiety. That's how it works. He can't marry into his mum's family, but the tribe, he kind of has to. Now, there's different clans, and I'm not touching on clans in this presentation. That's a story for another time, and it's a little bit complicated, but you get the idea. Alrighty. Whilst out on an errand, Running Water gets stranded on Queen Charlotte Islands. They're down here. We call them Queen Charlotte Islands. And they're owned by the Haida. What should you do? Have a go at the question, and then feedback. Come back when you're ready. So pause the video, Liam, and everybody else. Pause it now. Okay, what should you do? Well, it's very simple if you think about it. The first thing he does is he finds a totem pole to find a place where people live. And once he's found that, what should he look for on that totem pole? Of course, he's got to look for the eagle on the second part of the totem pole. Second from the ground, he looks for eagles. Because if you remember, people from the same moiety will always help each other, even if they're from different tribes. I read that out earlier. Did you notice? And therefore, on the Queen Charlotte Islands, on the Haida, he can be reasonably certain there's going to be some eagles because his mum was an eagle. And therefore, he's going to find someone that will look after him. All he has to do is show that he's part of the eagle moiety. Now, you do this by carrying your own totem in a medicine bag. So presumably some part of an eagle, maybe it's an eagle feather. I chose this Plains Indian because he's got this Plains Indian because he's got an eagle feather in his hair. But the Northwest Americans would have carried around with them maybe part of an eagle or an eagle feather to prove that they're an eagle moiety. You might say, well, people could lie. Why? Why would they lie? It's an interesting point. Why would you deliberately carry around different things? Oh, then everyone would help you. Sure, but consider this is part of their identity. It'd be like asking you to go by a different name in school because you think people will trust you more, but a name that's home that is utterly different. That's a big ask, and it's very difficult to do. And I would rather hope that no one feels they have to do that. I mean, if you have, I guess that's your call, but no one's going to do it for malicious purposes because it's just too hard to keep going. All righty. Final question. The Tlingit tribe are going to war over fishing rights. Turns out the Tsimshian have been following a pod of killer whales, Gispus woodawada, and they've been following them north. And they've entered the waters of the Tlingit tribe. It so happens the Tsimshian claim that the whale pod was originally in their waters and that they're okay to hunt them. The Tlingit dispute this and say that because they're in now their waters, they are now their whale pod, and that means the Tsimshian should yield and let the Tlingits do the hunting. The Tsimshian refuse to back down. They hunt a whale, they take it home. The tribe's chief, Running Water's father, stands wind in hair, declares war on the Tsimshian tribe. Should Running Water go? Remember, the chief is leader, but you don't have to follow him. That's how it works with Native Americans. Should Running Water follow him? Bear in mind, in war, you're going to have to kill people sooner or later. You try and avoid it, but you are going to end up with some people dead. So, should he go? Have a think about that. Explain your answer as fully as you can, and then come back here to see my answer. Not necessarily the right answer. It is a right answer, but not the right answer. So, have a go at writing your answers first. Pause now, and we'll talk afterwards. Okay, I'm going to assume I gave long enough there. What you have is a whole host of answers. Now, in a lesson, I would love to bounce off everything that you guys have written down and hear what you have to say. I'll just have to make do with the fact you're going to put it in the comments and submit your work, and I'll be able to look and comment on it directly. My answer is as follows, and you can say he should or he shouldn't. If you look at the Tsimshian, they carry a moiety that has eagle. There are very few eagle moieties in Tlingit, very, very few. I looked up, there are like 1 or 2. As a consequence, it is highly likely the Tsimshians won't ask the eagle moiety not to take part in hostilities out of fear of mixing it with people of the same moiety, whereas the ravens and wolves probably would. It is therefore probable that as a Tlingit tribesman, Running Water is going to come across people of the eagle moiety. That would be problematic because Running Water has to look after his moiety and they have to look after him. And because he's so rare in his tribe, there are so few eagles, it's unlikely that the Tsimshian will be looking for eagles. Therefore, he's put himself in a double bind. He could get hurt by people of the same moiety, or he could end up hurting people who are in his moiety. On that basis, I would argue he should not go to war. Now, you might have come up with a different answer. You might have argued that he should go to war out of loyalty to his father, and that is a perfectly acceptable answer, by the way. Or you might have said, because there are so few eagles, it is therefore unlikely that anyone on his side will really look out for him, so he'd be able to be looked after by people on the other side. And again, it's a perfectly acceptable answer. My answer is he shouldn't, and I've explained why, I hope. I hope you've done something similar with your answers. Okay, by this point, with your writing things down and pausing the video, we're close to a full lesson, but I promised something extra at the end of this, so let's get there. Let's see how much of it makes sense. Here I have a different set of actual North American tribes. Here we have Yalshon, I think. Thank you. He's a native brave, he's from the Tlingit tribe, and he's Wolf Moiety, and he's a proper Northwest Native American. Which man could this man marry? Which woman could this man marry? Is it A, caws like birds? Is it B, sweet like bear's honey? Or is it C, sounds like whale? It is, of course, C, sounds like whale. She's the Tlingit tribe, the right tribe, and a different moiety. In this case, she's one of those rare eagles. I checked, she actually is. That's not her name, sounds like whale. Names have been changed to protect the guilty. So Yalshon will be able to marry sounds like whale. He wouldn't be able to marry sweet like bear's honey, she's the wrong tribe, or caws like birds, she's the same moiety. Which item would this native be most likely to be carrying with them from the 3 below? Is it A, a ladle, B, a fish hook, or C, a war axe for fighting? Pause and have a think. Now, if you go back to the worksheet that I asked you to print out, or at least have with you when you're doing this video, you'll have noticed that wolves in the Tlingit tribe are able to be traders, explorers, and cooks. Now, traders and explorers and cooks are unlikely to carry a war axe for fighting. They're unlikely to carry a fish hook, but they are very likely, if they're cooks, to carry the ladle. You've got to work through a number of things there. So hopefully it shows whether or not you understand this. Okay, next bit. Which animal would you expect to see on this Native American's totem pole? Would you expect to see a wolf, an eagle, or a killer whale? Pause and have a think. Okay, which one is it? Obviously, it's the wolf, because it's his moiety. He might have had an eagle on there, unlikely, different moiety. And the moiety of Gispus Woodawada, remember, is unlikely because he's a Tlingit. Okay, bit of a homework for you now. I say homework. You're already at home. You know what I mean. Extension. I promised you a chance to begin researching your own Native American identity. And here's how it's going to go. You are going to look into a name for yourself. Native Americans, when they came of age, when they're able to move on, boys first, went on a spirit quest. We're going to use the Native Americans from the plains for this, because we're going to move on to Plains Indians in a moment. So you're going to be a Plains Indian. You're going to look up a Plains tribe, and you're going to look up a Plains moiety. But that'll come in a moment. For now, I just want you to come up with a Native American name. Your parents are going to name you, and they're going to give you a Native American name. How do Native American names work? They work based on your personality traits, or what they saw, or just what sounds good. And they're going to name you. So a bit like English names are often nicked from other languages. My favorite is Rebecca, it means princess. In Hebrew. You're going to do a similar thing. You're going to look up sort of Native American style names with your parents, and then you're going to translate them into English, or if you can, translate them into Native American. But here's where it gets difficult, and this is where the extra research comes in. I need you to research a Plains American tribe. It's got to be based on the plains. That's very important for something that we'll be doing right at the end before we finish this course, which I'm really looking forward to. I'll show you. Here are some from last year. These are teepees, so I'll be giving you something more on that. So it needs to be the plains. It needs to be the nomadic tribes in the plains. You need to find a tribe that appeals to you that lives on the plains. You then have to find a moiety within that tribe. Now, some of the tribes don't call their lineages or their clans moieties. They call them by different names. So be careful. Choose well. Try and find a moiety. Assign yourself a tribe, a moiety, and get from your parents a name. By the end of this course, you're going to come of age, and I'll explain to you how you get to choose your own name and how much your parents' naming of you will make a difference. All I ask is that when you have your name, your tribe, and your moiety, that you let me know, please. Now, I'm not going to put it as a, well, I am going to put it as a deadline on this, but ideally I'd have it by Friday, because that way I can use it in the next lesson. Now, I'll pre-record the lesson. So on the Friday, I might not refer to your names directly. But if you can have it to me by Friday, it means by Tuesday's lesson at the latest, I can refer to your names by your Native American names. And I'll try and use them in the feedback to any work that you submit. From today's lesson, please, 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 please feel free to submit what you've done, because I haven't been able to bounce off it as I would in a normal lesson. And I really enjoy reading what you do. It's been really good to see the work you've been producing, and thank you very much for that. But I definitely need your Native American name, your Native American tribe, and it's got to be plains, and your Native American moiety by Friday, please. It will require a little bit of research and a little bit of time. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll put it in the description of the show, my homework as well. I look forward to your answers. Genuinely, I do. And thank you, if you have been, for watching. Have a lovely day, Year 7, and I'll see you around.